kind of why assume his kid is young, he knows everything.
I'll leave it up to questions at the end. If anybody have any at that point. Just tell you a little bit about ourselves. Wells LLP is the 14th largest firm in Canada. We perform your audit out of the Cornwall office, so we're familiar with things going on in and around Cornwall and the Akwesasne community. So it allows us to better handle your audit as much as possible. As well as we have offices throughout the world. So if Mohawk Council ever had any international issues, even if it's just on the United States side, we're able to provide them some assistance if that comes up. Now, what's the purpose of an audit? The purpose of an audit is really to have somebody come in with a fresh set of eyes and take a look at the financial statements of Mohawk Council. The financial statements are prepared internally. And as you all know, Mohawk Council is comprised with a number of aspects, from health to justice to executive services to post-secondary education. It's a very, very large organization. So the purpose of an audit is for somebody to come in with fresh advice, take a look at the numbers, be completely independent from Mohawk Council to provide an opinion as to whether or not the financial statements actually paint the picture of what's happening during the year in question. And the year in question we're talking about is 2021 and March 31st, 22. You got to remember we're talking 2 years that have already gone by. To do that, we rely on a set of rules. The rules that we have to apply are called Public Sector Accounting Board rules, because Mohawk Council is considered a government entity and has to follow those type of rules in the preparation of its financial statements. The main reason we follow these rules is so that one First Nation compared to another First Nation, the statements are all prepared. So if you want to compare how we're doing with someone else, the statements will look the same. The main thing that's going to be different is the meat inside the statement. For example, Mohawk Council of Akwesasne has many departments, many sources of funding, where you might go to another First Nation that's much smaller with only one source of funding. So while the statements will look the same, what makes it up is completely different. And as well, the purpose of an audit is to allow the user to have a sense of confidence. So when they're looking at your financial statements, they know they're prepared according to a certain set of rules. They know what to expect with respect to the numbers. Now, council's role with respect to the audit, council is basically an oversight role. They're a political body voted in by the community. Their role is to make sure that the community's needs are met, making sure that programs are administered. If anything new is required, they go out and they solicit from the government as much as possible funding to meet those needs and fulfill the programs that benefit your community and meet those requirements. As well, they're responsible for the oversight and direction. Where's MCA going? How is it going as an organization? Is it meeting community needs? What's required to keep making things better for your community? So to do that, their role as a political body is to hire an administration that will take care of the daily needs, paying the bills, making sure the programs are put in place, and that the needs are met out in the community. As well as they're responsible for safeguarding assets. Now, safeguarding assets, you might think, okay, so they keep an eye on cash. Well, there's more to safeguarding assets. There's places like the Snaihne Recreation Center, the Akwesasne Health Facility, Akwesasne long-term care. Those are all assets that belong to your community and they need to be administered, taken care of, and moved forward. Even the roads that you took to get here are all fall under council's purview, and they're responsible for making sure the community is well served with respect to those things. Now, the next part in the hierarchy, so you've got council overseeing everything, they hire an administration. Administration is the one who takes care of the day-to-day. Their role is to make sure that the transactions are properly reported, bills are only paid once. They're not being paid twice. Your assets, your taxes safeguarded. As well, they're looking at all the contracts that MCA gets into. You receive a number of sources of funding throughout the year for your healthcare projects, for your ECDEV projects. Well, all those projects have rules with respect to them. There's reporting that has to be done, as well as there's targets that you have to hit, and they're only The funding you receive sometimes are for a year. That's done by March 31st. So there's, we call it use it or lose it money. So if the money isn't used, we have to pay it back to the government. So we try to make sure that we spend as much as we can, or we allocate as much expenses as we can to it. Some projects run over the year, and sometimes they run 2 years. So it's up to administration to make sure that they're keeping an eye on those projects, allocating as much expense to it to make sure that the money is used and kept in your community as best as possible. Now, to do that, they have to follow what's called generally accepted accounting principles. Again, we'll be talking a couple of times. There's rule books as to how financial information is prepared to prepare your financial statement. And those are basically just how you account for things. When do you recognize income? When do you recognize assets and things of that nature? And part of that is ensuring that MCA is following all the applicable rules, and again, safeguarding those assets. The main asset that they take care of is your financial asset, which is taking care of your cash and making sure your bills are paid and all the programs are run through the community. Now, our role is, as auditors, again, we have a set of rules. We have to perform an audit report to generally accepted auditing standards. Now, to do that, we have to be independent. We can't be part of council. We can't be involved in making any decisions, because then we would be auditing the decisions that we help to make. So that can't be done. We take a look at financial controls. We make suggestions, and then we let council know, are they actually working the way they're supposed to? So you've got all these rules in place to make sure that a bill is only paid once, or that you go tender for certain large jobs. It's our job to take a look at that and let council know how things are working. And as you can well imagine, there's $127 million that's spent in your community every year. We can't look at it. So our role is to do some testing, take a look at the controls, how's everything working, and come up with an opinion as to whether or not we can rely on the financial statement. And then take a look at year end, how things are, and did they actually paint the right picture as to what went on. And by doing that, we help the finance committee discharge the responsibility to the community and the council to make sure that the finances are taken care of properly. Now, the results of our audit is we were able to issue what's called an unqualified audit opinion. Unqualified sounds a little bit strange. The whole idea about it being unqualified is Mohawk Council Administration followed all the rules. If for some reason Mohawk Council were to look at the way something is accounted for, contract is taken care of, and they decide that it's not to be done according to the accounting rules, we would have to do a qualification in that respect. I'm happy to say that based on our audit, our testing, we were able to issue an unqualified audit report with respect to the overall financial statements of councils. Now, that sounds like a big task, but to do that, we also issue about 110 to 130 annual reports on an annual basis. Some of them are audits for programs, some of them are reviews, some of them are compilations. Your government contributions, which represent a significant amount of the funding that comes into the community, as we'll see later on, have a lot of stipulations, and those stipulations often are financial reporting, and we have to do financial statements to attest to that reporting. So at the end of the day, whenever we sign off on the statements of Mohawk Council, we do quite a bit of work at different levels. I feel very confident that whenever we issue an audit report, that the numbers are very tight. So now on to your financial results. A little bit dry there. So at the end of the year, you got to remember we're doing 2 years here. So we're going to touch on March 31st, 22, March 31st, 23 just went by. We'll be doing the audit work for this summer. We'll be reporting to you next year on this. So we'll be talking about the 22 numbers and the 21 numbers at the same time. So at the end of March 31st, 22 last year, Mohawk Council had $397 million in assets. That's made up of a number of items. The main ones are primarily listed on the pie chart that you see ahead. At the end of the year, we ended up with about $10 million in cash. Housing and housing construction loans that are collected throughout the year and new ones are issued amounted to about $5.7 million. Your government business entities, that's your investment in the Akwesasne Cornwall Harbor project. Government funding receivable, $13 million, big number, but you gotta remember, because we have so many sources of funding, we get it for a period of time. Sometimes we have to spend the money and apply to get it later. So at March 31st at year end, there's always a timing difference between when the cash should have been in and when the cash comes in. So that's why we have such a large amount coming in from government entities. Accounts receivable about $4.3 million, and your investments $363 million. And as the majority of the community is aware, the biggest portion of that is made up of three items. One is the Dundee Land Claim. Two is the old 2008 partnership, Casino-Rama, and the surpluses that we've had with federal funding over the years, as well as a few other projects. But those make up the majority of the money. And council is being good that whenever those monies are come in, they're put aside and they're invested to get a return for the community. As well, when we talk about the Dundee Land Claim, there is a resolution in place where all of the money that's been received, nothing gets used for operations. Anything that is earned gets put aside into the reserve until such time as it's moved into a trust or another vehicle such as the partnership, but I believe the trust is the one that's being looked at right now. The last year, at March 31st, 22, we had 397 million in assets. At the end of 21, we had 362 million. And as you can see from the pie chart, the setup is about the same. It's always going to be the same. Things fluctuate a little, but the majority of your assets will always be in the form of investment. Now, this chart gives you a bit of a better idea as to where things are going. You see at the end of this year compared to the year before, your cash is down about $2 million. That's primarily due to, if you look at your accounts receivable, they're up about $2 million. That has to do with some OLG money. We were due $2 million. It came in April rather than March. So if it had come in March, you see this line as being flat and your cash would be sitting at $12 million. It's just a question of timing. So everything else seems to be moving in the right direction. Your government funding is up a little bit again. It's a question of timing with COVID. Things were a little bit slower coming in at the end of last year. I believe things are much different this year, but we should be seeing some improvements as we go along. As well, if you look at your investments, you went from 330 million to about 365 million over 2 years. The main reason for that is we had some large receivables the year before. We had some surpluses in funding. What happened is when the money came in, it was rolled over into investments. The more money we have in investments, the more money is earned for your community. So the administration is constantly monitoring this, and whenever the money is available, it's moved into investments to make more money for the community. So now those were your financial assets. Financial assets is anything that can turn into cash in a year. Financial liabilities is the same thing. There's basically 5 main components of your financial liabilities. You've got your employee benefit obligations. That's basically vacation pay. As you can imagine, at March 31st, a lot of the staff haven't taken their holidays. Most people take it during summer and fall. So that liability always fluctuates between about $1 million and $1.5 million every year. Long-term debt, $5.4 million. That's CMHC funding that you receive to help finance the community's housing projects. We haven't had one in about, I think the last one was about 2 years ago. So the Mohawk Council is always looking to see what projects can come on. The projects are financed by long-term debt and they're paid off over a period of time. We also have some grants from CMHC to help us pay the interest on the loans. So while we pay some interest, we also get a grant to cover part of it. Accounts payable, $11 million. That's just a question of timing. Your bills come in April and May and June. That had to do for March expenses. So that's always a large expense. Same thing with your payroll. Your payroll is always an item at the end of the year. If we pay you, the payroll falls on a Monday to the end of the month, pays until the end of the week. So we always have a large liability to pay that. Deferred revenue, that represents funding that you've received. Sometimes you get, the community will often receive funding at a point in time, but it's for projects that will run sometimes 2, sometimes 3 years in duration. So what happens, we get the money up front, we only recognize it when we spend money. So there's a lot of funding that's always sitting. It's usually around $25 million. At the end of March 22, it was about 35 million because right near the end of the year, we had received some funding for some capital projects. About 2 million for education, 1.4 million for Hawthorne Road, 1.3 million for Buckshot, or Hilltop, and 1.4 million for a family violence project. So again, it's just a question, if the money's here, we're gonna spend it, it's just, we haven't done it at the end of that year. And government funding repayable, again, it becomes a question, and I'll explain a little bit more as we go along. It's up higher than normal because of COVID. Problem with a lot of the funding that you receive, especially from the province of Ontario and the province of Quebec, it's use it or lose it. So whenever the money comes in, it has to be spent, or else the money has to go back to the various governments where the funding came from. So that's 2021. You see the split up if you turn it to the next one. You see our liability will change a little bit. You see the deferred revenue's gone up again. A lot of that is because we got all of that special capital money for projects that are going to benefit your community in the long run. That money is going to be spent probably this during 22-23 fiscal year that was finished, and some of it will be spent in the 24 year. Government funding repayable is up. We have a lot of money to be paid at the end of 22 to the government. That has to do with the question of timing, and this is where COVID starts rearing its head. Normally, in 21, we would have had a lot of money to pay back to the government, but the government realized for various programs that because of COVID, you weren't able to get your program out to the community as much as possible because people couldn't come in to get the services they required. So they allowed you to push the money off in 22. 22 comes around, then the federal government and the provincial government number, and I believe the Quebec government also threw in all kinds of money for COVID expense. So all this money comes in to cover expenses that would normally be covered by your funding agreements. There's only so much to be spent and only so much to go on because COVID is happening and there's only so much activity allowed. So we ended up with a number of dollars received in the community that just couldn't be spent because of COVID, and we're able to spend them out there. So we made use of the COVID money from the feds first. Ends up being, we didn't use provincial money, so we're giving back to them. We're giving them back the money. It's just a point time calculation. Next year, that would be a completely different thing, but because of COVID, that's what we're looking at. Now your non-financial assets, those are for things that are going on in your community. These are the assets that are owned by the community of Akwesasne, such as the rec facility, Akwesasne, the Nisda, your roads, your water treatment plant. Those are all assets that are purchased for the benefit of your community. Right now, they accumulate to about $112 million. The other large item in there is capital assets under construction. That represents projects that are ongoing, but aren't complete by March 31st, 22. Now, at March 31st, 22, there's about 10 projects on the go. There's two main ones. One is the fiber to home project, which represents about $6.1 million. That project will be funded and is still ongoing right until September 23 this year. And as well, there's about 813,000 spent on Buckshot Road. Those are the two main components of that $7.8 million. So for 21, you can see again your capital assets make up the majority of it. Project under construction is only about $1.5 million going on for the private home project, and there was only about 400,000 spent on Buckshot Road. It's another small project. So they're all ongoing as we go along. But as you can see, there's a significant change. The prepaid expenses are always the same. That's, for example, that's something like, and we all experience it. We pay insurance policy, we pay it for the year. Come March March 31st, only a part of the year has gone by. The rest of it relates to the rest of the financial year. So we put off those expenses until the year relates. And that's what our prepaid expenditure is for. Capital assets under construction, as I indicated, we've got the big projects. That number will probably grow to about $13 million this year, primarily due to the fiber home project, which is significant to the community. It was a $14 or $15 million project in total. And that project continues to go, as well as some other projects that are ongoing for the community. As well as your capital assets, they've gone up a little bit. There hasn't been a huge amount of spending. Again, COVID had a big impact on that. Because we had a distance with the community and everything else, everything sort of slowed down. The equipment projects are ongoing, but not significant in nature, at least not for the year ending March 31st, 2022. We should see a large upswing in spending in the fiscal year that was going to follow when we do next year's presentation. So we talked about our assets, our liabilities. Where does the money come from, and why do we receive the money for your community? The purpose of this pie chart is to give you a quick idea as to where the money comes in and why we receive it. The largest sum of money you receive for your community are your health funding, your board of ed, and your executive services. Your executive services represent most of your federal government financing. While it's shown as corporate executive services, it's just the way it's shown in the books. It's used for all kinds of aspects of MCA. It helps to bolster social services. It helps to bolster health. It helps to bolster your board of education, because that's where a lot of your funding for your board of ed, your secondary education costs come from. As you can see, the chart's a little bit different than it was for 22, and a lot of that is really just the way we recognize things internally for Mohawk Council. We sort of reinvented ourselves with respect to departments. So the chart's a little bit different, but the first one we saw is what we're seeing on an ongoing basis going forward. So again, this just gives us an idea. You can see from the blue columns that the current year funding is continuing to go up in all areas of funding for the council. The only one, like I said, executive services is down, but it's just because of the way we sort of reinvented ourselves in the way we allocate funds across the funding. So where does all this money come from? Well, the primary source of funding for Mohawk Council and the community is government transfers. As you can see, it's pretty evident from this pie chart that 89% of the money comes from government transfers. This is from the feds, the province of Ontario, and the province of Quebec. Your second biggest source of fund is the Ontario Lottery and Gaming, Onerahtohko, which is actually only 2% of the funding, and some and interest at 2%. Other than that, everything else is very, very small with respect to revenue to help pay for the expenses required for the community. 2021, same idea, nothing's really changed. That's a picture that's pretty much going to stay steady as you go along, because the majority of your funding is and will continue to be from the government. For example, we're in the middle of a 10-year funding agreement with the federal government, so they will continue at least for the next 7 years, to be 3 years in, continue to be your main source of funding. Again, this pie chart sort of shows you where we're going, funding is moving along. I'm going to talk about this a little later. You'll see unrealized losses. There's been a loss on investment, and I'll explain that. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that a little further into the presentation. But other than that, our sources of revenue are pretty steady across the board. With government transfers obviously being the big change. We went from about 107 million in 2021 to 120 million in 2022. Again, the majority of that is funding that we're receiving for capital projects. There's one-offs. Because of your 10-year government transfer arrangement, the majority of your funding is always going to stay. The only thing that's going to be changed when we take on special projects, or we do special capital projects such as the fiber home, where we'll see blips in your income on an annual basis. So if you look at MCA overall, where we've been since 2017, 2017, this community was funded with about $85 million in total revenue. It's been steadily increasing to the point where in 2022 we're up to $127 million to fund the various projects that are going on in the community. Part of that is increases in funding. Part of it is the majority of this increases in programs that are being offered to the community. For example, in the middle there, I think it was around 1819 when we took on CAS funding, which was a few $1 million. And again, all of those projects just need more money to be spent in the community for the benefit of the community. So we know that most of the money comes from the government entities. Sorry, I'm not very bothered. Where does it come from? So in 2022, the government agencies funded MCA to a total of $120 million. $81.9 million, $82 million of that came from the feds. Other federal projects, CMHC and fiber home and other projects like that represented $10.6 million. And then Ontario, $24 million, and the province of Quebec, $3.2 million. In 21, mine's about the same, spread out a little different, but we only had $107 million. The feds, $80 million, and the province, $20 million. So it's obvious that the federal government, ISC, formerly INAC, formerly ANSI, it's in the reconstructing itself, represent the majority of the funding for the. So this gives you a bit of an idea as to where the funding is. It gives you a bit of a clearer indication. I guess the one takeaway from this that always kind of surprises me when I speak with council is your community is made up of 3 territories, essentially Snaihne, Onerahtohko, 2 of which are in Quebec, and Quebec represents a significant small portion of the overall funding. It's always been a bit of a surprise in my, I guess, in the back of my mind, but Ontario does pick up a large part of the funding that does benefit the Quebec members. Again, the purpose here, you know, how the government agencies, the government agencies or the levels of government are doing over the last 5 years. They've all been growing kind of steadily. Quebec kind of flat down at the bottom. Ontario has been growing a little bit. Other federal projects, flat. We always do about the same thing with them, but we see sort of a spike in 2022. Again, that has to do with your capital funding and your fiber home project, which is significant and respect to dollars that's the overall. As I mentioned earlier, the second largest source of funding is the Ontario First Nation 2008 Limited Partnership, better known by a lot of people as seen around. Over the last 5 years, the funding from this agency or this limited partnership has changed a little bit. Prior to 17-18, everything's always kind of flat at about $4.5 million. In 2019, we see a large spike in the purple column. What ended up happening there is OFNLP pays out to its First Nation communities on an annual basis. They don't pay it all out. They hang on to a little bit. They built a reserve. In 2019, they made a decision to pay extra out to the various communities. That's why we see that big spike in 2019. Then you see from 2020 down to 2022, you see a progressive change. And as we all know, those are the years that COVID started impacting our country, our communities in general. So 2020, 21, we start seeing a dip. 2022, which you got to remember, is 3 months of 22 and 9 months of 21, when we're sort of the height of the pandemic. We see a huge decrease in people that are going out to gambling agencies and resulting in a significant decrease in funding that's available to Akwesasne and the other First Nations that benefit from this partnership. I'm expecting that we're probably going to see a jump in that funding in 23 and the year that just went by, but it all depends on how soon people get back to their old habits. So so we know where the money's coming from, where is it going? As you can see with this pie chart, the primary areas where money is spent in the community of Akwesasne is your Board of Education, 25% of the funding, or 25% of the expenditures are spent there. Your health, your Onerahtohko, non-insured health benefits, 31% of your funding. And then police and housing, rounding out the next one down at 10%, with smaller amounts being spent on executive services and economic development. You go to 21. You see the chart's a little bit different, but it's essentially the same areas. You're always spending your money in those areas. So those are the areas that benefit the community of Akwesasne. So again, here we get to see the spending. The blue columns represent 22, the red represent 21. You can see the spending is going up. There's a little bit more money being spent on programs, either new programs or more money being spent on programs over the years. So you know the departments that are where the money is being spent. You might be wondering what's the money actually being spent on. So when you look at Akwesasne as an organization, you can clearly see that 49% of all of the money that's being spent on an annual basis is for the benefit of personnel and salary. Because let's face it, that's the backbone of putting out all the projects, putting out all the services that are required to help the community. And this is where 49% of the money is there to employ. The majority of which is members of the community of Akwesasne. On top of that, the next part is your program supply. Those are basically labor supplies, everything you need on a daily basis. You've got your people, but you need to provide them with the supplies they need. And then you're spending your money on all the smaller items. The next big one is your uninsured benefits. That represents things that aren't covered by PVIP or OVIP, such as dental benefits that are covered by the funding that's provided from the government. Again, 2021, still the same thing. You're always going to see salaries and benefits representing 48, 49% of the funding. I went back to 2017. It was always that number. We've never gone over 50%, but it's always a large part of where the money goes. Again, just the whole purpose of the slide really just to give you a quick idea when you look at it, give you an idea of the funding going up, the expenses going down. And as you can see pretty clearly, we're always spending a little bit more. If we get more money, we're spending more in the community as much as we can. For the projects, you've always got capacity issues, whether or not you can find all the people for all the services you want. It's nice to go after the funding, which is fantastic, but you know, it's always sometimes it's difficult to find all the resources you need, whether it's a nurse, a social worker, education workers, to fund everything that we need on an ongoing basis. So we've got the money going in, we've got the money going out. What have we been doing on an annual basis? So this is sort of a summary as to where we are for operations. The green lines indicate what is our annual surplus spending. You can see in 2019, our annual surplus was about $10 million. And in 2021, 22, our surplus have grown to $20 to $24 million. Now that's due to a couple of things. In 2020, as I mentioned earlier, Akwesasne signed a 10-year funding agreement with the federal government, which represented a little bit of extra funding that's coming in. We've also seen a lot more capital funding coming in. Now, capital funding is a bit of a weird thing for public accounting. If we get money to build something, we have to bring it into the books and we recognize it as income and get a surplus right away. But as you all know, if we put up a building, that building stood for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So we write that off over 40 years. So if we spend $5 million, we get a bump of $5 million right away. So 24 million, that's really, say there's 5 million, that's really a surplus of 19. Because the expenses we're not gonna take in, we're not gonna write off those assets, those roads, those health facilities for a period of 20 to 40 years. So it's again, it's a time, so you need to take that with a bit of a grain of salt. So really, if you look at each year, our operating surplus is probably about $3, $4, $5 million less than what it really is because of those capital projects, but you haven't seen surpluses. Again, I'll use the word COVID. Because COVID came in, we're administering projects, but we're not administering them as much as we should have been. Your health facility wasn't always open, your arena wasn't always open. So while we're still paying salaries, we're not paying all of the other expenses that go on with it. Because it's federal money, it's not use it or lose it, you actually get to hang on to the surplus, which forms part of your annual surplus and money going on a regular basis. What's the Benji impact? Benji has had a significant impact. In 2019, Benji was something that the council was working on. In 2020 is when it was realized. The community received $235 million, which went straight into its reserves. In 2021, those investment monies made $2.4 million. In 2022, and take this with a grain of salt, we lost $1.5 million. Now, that's not as bad as it seems. The accounting policies for Mohawk Council is we recognize the market value of investments. And as we all know, the market goes up and the market goes down. When the market's always moving in the same direction, that we would have steady income being earned. The problem is around 2022, COVID started getting a little bit better. That means the markets were getting better. That means you were starting to get higher interest rates. So whenever we bought some bonds, when they were only paying 1%, we might have paid a premium because the one that paid 5%. But when the interest rates started going up, let's say 2 or 3 that we can get in the market, that bond premium results in a loss from the investment. So for accounting purposes, strictly accounting purposes, we have a loss on the books. I'm happy to say that in speaking with the Director of Financial Administration and your staff, the investments that would bring your surplus from 235 to 237 is about $236 million. I can tell you that today it's worth about 245. That blip on the radar has completely turned around. So while it looks awful, it's really nothing to be concerned about. It's completely turned around. It's just the way we kind of recognize on that item. Now, as far as reserves go, Mohawk Council is sitting on some significant reserves. There's some small reserves that have grown from about 11, 12 million to about 15. For a number of items, they're not. While that number is significant, it's made up of a whole number of items. Your Dundee Lane claim has gone from 0 to $236 million. We just spoke about that. It's really about 245 today. Casino-Rama, OLG, it's gone from 27 million to $34 million. That represents money that we're receiving through that partnership. The idea behind that money is to fund things that government agencies don't fund. For example, would be a few years ago, there was a fire truck on an annual basis. I believe there's funding for oil for seniors, the school buses, things of that nature. So that continues to grow to the point where we haven't been spending money every year, it's been growing. Keep in mind though, when I say there's a reserve, there's a surplus of $34 million. Council, and I'm not sure how many years ago, had set aside, I believe, $8 or $9 million of that money for intergeneration, future generations, and children with special needs in your community. That money is kept aside to be used specifically for the benefit of those people in the community that require that type of extra help. As well, we've had some surpluses over the years in INAC, which is our main funding source. It's grown from $60 million in 2019 to $47 million at the end of 2022. But remember, that number is a bit of a misnomer. Probably overstated by about $15 million because of those capital projects. That money is spent. We just haven't written it off over time. So it really was about $30 million of that money that's available to the community. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as best I can.
Yeah, go ahead, right in the front here first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. How many years have you been doing the audit for MCA?
Well, we were going on 10, 11 years now.
10 years? Yeah, okay. And so how much do you charge for a year for the audit? How much audit fees do you?
Our standard audit fee that we normally plan is probably about $300,000. Last year, we were a bit higher. We had some unique situations last year that some of you may or may not know. A significant member of the finance and administration staff passed away in November of 21. So we've been assisting Mohawk Council with their reports and assisting the analysts that are there to be able to get the information ready for us. Part of the reason we're late also is because we're having a bit of a shortfall in finance and administration staff. We're normally 5, we're down to 3 right now, so we're doing the best possible reporting now.
If you're working in the finance office, how can you be independent if you're actually right in there to lead the financial accounting?
We're not doing the financial accounting. We're helping the analysts with the information that they need. There's been a lot of turnover, so they've been relying on us for our files to take a look and say, okay, how do I get to what we need? So we've been providing them information that we've used in prior years. So they've got a starting point, and we provide them for our contacts at the provincial government, for our contacts at the federal government, so that they can move along and get the files going. We try to stay as independent as we can, knowing full well that we can't audit our own work.
When you prepared for the audit at the very beginning, did you put together an audit plan?
We do. We usually have a sit-down meeting with finance administration. We're usually a day or two, and we meet probably 4 or 5 times throughout the audit at different points to see where we stand. Like I said, we do about 110 to 130 reports. So we have to spend a lot of time with the finance staff. Where are you on this? Where are you on this? Who's screaming at you to allow this for this? And we have to take care of it.
In your audit plan, were there any specific areas that you focus on?
It depends on the year. Last year, primarily because of the fact that staff was very minimal, we spent a lot of time concentrating on making sure that every source of funding was recognized, every source of funding was spent and maximized as much as possible, and pointing the staff and saying, well, you consider this because maybe you've got some money that could be allocated from this program to this program to leave more money in the community at the end of the day. So we spent a lot of time on the funding just because there was a limitation in staff. We felt that the best we could do for the community was to make sure that the funding was spent properly and maximized.
Did you have a management letter that came with your audit as well, where you identified some areas for improvements?
We discuss those normally as we go along. That'll usually be issued about a month after the audit. We just issued the audit, I believe, June 19th. I'm hoping that in July we'll be able to issue the management letter for the year that just went by, or make it a combination of 22 and 23, because we're just in the middle of starting 23 now.
So did you ask chief and counsel if any of the council members who work for suspected any fraud?
We don't meet with the individual council members on their own. We tend to have a meeting with the finance committee, because the finance committee is a committee in place to take care of financial administration and take care of that duty on behalf of council. So we have a meeting with them. I also have a separate meeting with the grand chief And I normally try to have a meeting with the executive director and the director of finance and administration, but there's been some changes at the executive director level where we haven't had the opportunity last year to do so. But normally we would sit down for a day, and a half, and meet with all of those various individuals, ask those questions.
If there was one area of improvement in the internal controls, what would that be?
Okay,
Biggest area that you would be also concerned with?
is there really? Well, let me step back. My concern, internal controls on the general, because you gotta remember, we're talking general, internal controls for a lot of areas. In general, I'd say they're working well, and my bigger concern for Mohawk Council with respect to their finances would probably be the level of finance staff that they have available to them on a day-to-day basis. Their day-to-day staff, take care of paying bills, receiving money is good, it is fine, everything seems to be working. There's some days that are paid than others, naturally. But in the heyday, where things worked out the best, we had 5 individuals, 3 analysts, 2 controllers. Right now, we have a director of finance and administration, a controller that is care of part of things. And then we have 1 analyst and 1 consultant. So they're a little light on that area. It's an area that we know of. We've been actually discussing that with finance and council for about a year and a half now. But there is a real lack of qualified staff to do that, because when you're looking at things like that, you're looking at different types of funding and a lot of different areas, as you can well appreciate, that work the background. You need someone that has a strong capacity and understanding. There's not a lot of those people in the community right now, and the problem is, when you do get them, you tend to steal them either from another First Nation community, you steal them from the township, you steal them from another area. There seems to be a real lack right now of people with those capabilities, so it's a challenge right now.
My last question is, so you've already been approved to do the audit for next year? Has that already been approved?
I believe we've been approved. I know there's a letter that's gone through to ISC and OLG. There's a number of letters that have to go to various agencies approving us to, or allow them to send us the information on your behalf so that we can do the audits on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was another question in the back. Was over here first and we'll go.
Okay.
No, no. Give her the other one.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Two questions, and one is, can you get a copy of the numbers and the report itself?
Absolutely, they've been provided to council, and I believe it's been posted to MCA's website,
Is that?
or will be, sorry.
The charts here, like the charts and then it's really good.
Yes, the financial statements, I don't normally present the financial statements just because it's a bunch of numbers, it's harder to follow. But they are available with council, and they will be, Heather just indicated, they will be on the website shortly.
Can we get copies of those from here on in whenever you're presenting the financial statements? There, you have 2 people in the room who are CPAs.
Yeah, we will. I thought they were going to be here, the actual audit itself, but definitely will. They will be on the website, and all material from tonight, all this goes on the website as well.
My next question is, the rules for independence has been definitely much more narrow as a result of Enron.
Yes.
20 years ago. And when you're taking down any role in the finance department, the auditor, I believe that independence has been there. And I think Mohawk Council should start establish a committee to determine if that. I don't believe that the accounting firm that you hired is in a position to decide if they're independent or not. But if you set up a committee to determine if they're independent, and I think that should be done sooner rather than later. And it's only gonna be, unless you're still employed, and I still have a contract to assist the finance department.
I have a consultant that is working through our consulting company on behalf of MCA. And the only reason we've done that, I just pay his pay. I don't oversee any of the work he does. He works strictly for council, and the reason he did that is really simply an insurance issue. Because he requires errors and omissions insurance, he does it through a consulting company to help out Mohawk Council.
I understand that, but it's still, the transaction is through Welch, and I believe that the council should set up a committee to decide if the independence is taken care of on this audit. And it's gonna be, not the end of the world. You're qualified as statements as independent, you are not independent in regard to this audit.
Okay, thank you. There was another question here in the middle.
My question is, you go back to that last slide prior to the questions, please. Okay, so I would like to ask if I could ask my question after he leaves, specific to this slide, so we could come back when he leaves, because I don't believe he needs to hear my question. It's more about the community. Is that possible?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Al on this presentation? It's one way in the back.
I am standing on. Two questions, so they go in with the consultant. Can we get a breakdown? I looked at the department overall budgets there back in March, May. So can we get a breakdown of all the consultants that have been hired through the organization? And maybe report or ending? I'd like to know what the total is of what we're spending with consultants. And if there's reports that we need. And my second question is, who sits on the finance committee, the current finance committee?
So just on your first question, we can provide aggregate information on that. And we'll have to look at the privacy issues around individual, but we can classify it, i.e. legal, like, what have you. And the question on the finance committee, if you can put your hands up, if you're on the finance committee. There you go. No. We've been having some issues in getting community members involved into the finance committee. I would say that at this time, we're still in the transition of full implementation of the financial administration law. We have been challenged by persons within the MCA as far as, as Al has alluded to, some of the personnel issues of having enough people to operate the department, but also COVID has been a huge contributing factor. We acknowledge that we're not fully implemented the FAL, but it is definitely something we are moving towards.
The next question is the community. We have some CPAs.
We have received one application. The individual is here. It has been posted several times on our social media, has gone into the Indian Times. So the application as was received is going through process right now, but there definitely is other positions available. So we are looking for persons who are interested in sitting on the MCA Finance Committee. And I will say that the committee, on behalf of the committee, they are committed to meeting in the evenings to meet the objective or meet the availability of community members. It hasn't started yet because there's no community members on there yet. So there's a question up front here.
Good evening. I have a question for council. Does it show on there that council chiefs have been out lobbying for money for their departments or their this organization? I'd like to know if there's a financial benefits or they are. I mean, that's part of your that's part of, isn't that part of your duties as being on council, is going out and finding money to bring in for the departments and the organization? like to know if there's anything that's come in since COVID has been over.
Mhm. There's no specific report that's generated in the audit that can identify that, but it's. I mean, it's not a very simple question to answer because it's can be broken down in many different ways. There's lobby efforts that are underway. There's money that's been received in various areas. So there's not a specific chart that says, Chief X has gotten, X amount of dollars in the last, year or 5 years or what have you.
Also could get one.
It'd be very difficult to identify. We can take it back and see what could be possible to report back. Go ahead.
I have a question for the auditor. I just wanted to check and see for the audit for 2022, 2023. When will that be available?
We just made some phone calls today. We're getting ready to start the audit. Beginning probably next week. We're starting to do our planning and work through it. The problem we run into with the audit is there's so many aspects to Mohawk Council. As I indicated, there's about 110, 130 reports. Some of those reports we have to review before we do the big audit, because if we happen to miss money or leave it on the table, the community loses it. Because once we close off the audit overall, the books as they are stay the way they are. I'm anticipating in a perfect world, probably at the earliest mid-September. It's a long process, but again, as I indicated, finance is short on staff. So it just makes it challenging. When we had our best years, when there were 5 individuals, the best year we were able to get the audit done was September 2nd. Normally, it was always done around October-ish. But with the challenge we were facing last year, it's taken significantly longer. Partially because, as we indicated, there is a consultant that was vetted by council. He was actually interviewed by the executive director and the director of finance and administration before he was hired on to do the work. We still don't have a full complement of staff, so it's very challenging to give you an accurate date or an accurate time as to when that will all be done.
According to the FAL that is established, so hopefully you'll be able to meet those timelines that are identified in there. As well as the information that goes out to the community. I'm not sure, I think you said this audit has also accepted the audit already as presented.
Yes.
So you're required 10 days notice to the community on the presentation of the audit. So I just saw the agenda out today, not expecting to have it presented at today's general meeting. So hopefully we'll follow some timelines. With respect to the 110 or so reports that are done for the organization, do members of the community have an opportunity to review those reports that are submitted? Like for ACFS is, what is it, contribution agreements, any kind of funding agreements that are done and reports are required, are community members able to review them?
They would be all part of a resolution because they're accepted by council, so they'd be available through the access to information process. They're all, I can assure you, they're not very exciting. They're all very technical information as far as revenue and expenses, but they definitely are available. Not all of the audits. Okay. So as the director is telling me that the all of the smaller target audits are posted on the internet, so we can find the link for you. But
Question that I had before the council back in February is one of the items to report back on was the expenses for lawyers, like your question earlier about consultants. So if we could have that aggregated data, how much we're paying this consultant, this lawyer, as well as legal fees for any lawsuits brought against council for the last while, because it looks like expenses, professional fees are about 5%. Is legal fees part of that 5%?
With respect to the expenses, talking about professional fees, yes, we're talking consultants, accounting, lawyers, and I have to look at my engineering. It depends on the definition of professional fees and what department we're talking about. And how they get on to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just like to make a comment about that, all of the reports, 110 or 130 reports. One of the reasons the community passed the financial admin law is because we are the readers of the financial statements, and the reporting should come to the community. Like, if we want to know how much is being spent on consultants, that's the report that should come back to the community. Like, the old way of doing things, where all these reports go to the government of Canada, is no longer. We're the main people that should be getting these reports.
Thank you. I can assure you they are available, but as I said earlier, we are moving towards full implementation of the FAL. It's not been ideal, but that is part of the commitment that we've made to ensure we're meeting those obligations, and that includes the reporting and community reporting as well. Okay, any final comments, questions on this presentation?
I know there's a special report that's done for schedule of remuneration for the council members. And I know the last time I had seen one, I believe it was back in 2021, maybe, or 1920, that area. And there was a question at that particular time, when it was on Zoom, whether or not there was an opportunity to identify the expenses that had been incurred by council with regard to use of their credit cards. And I know I was informed at that time that would be an additional column that would be added into that annual report. But the last one for March 31st, 2022, it just shows salary, benefits. I think travel. But I know specifically for credit card usage, is another column that needs to be added to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Over here.
Want to make a comment, I guess, because you said that there were 4 people, 4 chiefs that are on the finance committee. And I see 2 of them, I think, as being a conflict with the director. So I'm hoping that you change that. So, bye.
Thank you. I think there's an annual declaration of conflict and that's made by the members, and there is a definition in the law that defines what a conflict is, but thank you, we'll note that. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Al and Heather, for the presentation this evening. Again, we will make sure that all the material that has been shared on the slides, as well as the actual audit, is on the website by next week, and we'll make sure that that's circulated on social media. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know. Well, he's still here. Okay, we're gonna now turn to the business from the floor, and I know that Cheryl has asked for a question specific to this, but we'll entertain it under business from the floor, so we'll start with you, Cheryl.
Okay, I just looked at the agenda, so we're going to business from the floor. Well, so I want to step back. I didn't think the auditor basically needed to hear how we felt or what we think. When I look at Casino Rama at the 34 million, and I look at the other at 15 million in there, those 2 pots of money add up to 49 million plus, whatever, 50 million. When we look at the needs of the community, I look at it from this perspective. The Casino Rama dollar is our money, and it should be addressing immediate needs in our community. So when we think about the subjects of needs of what's been presented in council over the last few months, why is it so difficult to make a decision in spending some of those monies on immediate needs like the fire department. That's been talked about, the need for it in the district of Snaihne. How difficult is it to say that money is gonna protect us now and in the future at 49 million or whatever? We can't take 3 or 4 or the whole pot of it and pay for what is needed. So I don't understand why it's so difficult for council to make the decisions based on needs and wants, because the wants, we want swimming pools, and we don't always need it. We need fire, definitely, we need fire protection.
Right. Thank you. I know that we've talked about this specific item in the last meeting that we had here. We had committed that we would move forward, and we are committed to moving this forward. Now, specifically, there's 2 issues here, right? Is process, right? And we talked about process for building, whether it be a fire department or building an administration building or building recreation. We are challenged by the processes that it takes to be able to design, to be able to tender, to site ready, all of these things. Believe me, it's frustrating to us as well. I mean, we've been talking for about speed bumps and stop signs for quite some time, and the process to determine whether or not the speed limit should be raised or lowered, or a sign should be put in and where it should be put in, is very frustrating to us. And so capital projects, have a process that we're trying to navigate through. One of the things that we're always reminded about is fiduciary responsibility of the government on assets or supporting things we're going to do as a community. So we always have to make sure that we're going to the government. While we may have, some surpluses that could support the immediate investment into, a fire department, we want to make sure that the governments are putting their fair share in as well, right? So I know that this is very frustrating for the community. I can tell you that it's frustrating for council. There was a meeting that was held specifically around the fire department just recently. We are trying to make sure we have an understanding what the design will look like. We have received a presentation from the director, who I can tell you the department as well is having a hard time staffing people in the department. And that's the technical department. We've had a presentation from them. We've received the design, we've received the process. Part of going forward to make sure that we can get some money from the government, and not saying all of it, but a contribution from the government, is there needs to be consultation with the community abroad on this asset, right? So we have directed the department within the MCA to have those community meetings so that we can check the box and say we have heard from the community, and so that we can make the submission to the government to say, we need this assets with this tag on it. So we are moving that forward. I know this is, not the answer you want, but we are really challenged by the ability to find people to design, to find builders, and this has been a problem since the COVID, and it's been difficult to find staff to support the technical department to move this along. So it is a priority of ours, and I can tell you that council wants to move capital projects along. We have a trust development underway that, we want to see tangible things from the money we have. But it's not just hand, John Doe a check for $17 million to build something, because we have to have the financial controls. We have to justify our processes to the community and make sure we're doing it to safeguard the money, the asset. We don't want to build something it's from a contractor who it's a tail light warranty and we have a broken system. We have cases of those in this community in the past. So we're complexed by all of this that we're trying to push forward. I know it's frustrating, and we are working towards it. I'm hopeful by the end of summer, we will have a clear pathway forward, some money allocated to move this project forward so that we can start getting something in the ground. Go ahead. No, back to you, Cheryl.
So, can you hear me?
Yep.
So before I go, I didn't realize we were gonna jump straight to the business one before. double check the agenda here, but, Philip, did you have your hand up before me?
Were you talking about something else different?
Yeah, bring up my,
Was yours in relation to what?
I'll let Philip go, I'll go back next time your list, all right?
All right. So. I know basically, like, when there's comments that says we do community consultation. There was community consultation back in 2016 with the CCP, the community consultation plan. It's almost coming up to a 10-year point, which means that the community might need to be consulted in the very near future as to what should be the priorities of needs versus wants, because what was said previously, we don't want to waste money in certain areas when we have so significant needs in others. So I think that's one area of guidance. Similarly, that's going to flow into what is going to happen with Dundee consultation, because that is more than just money consultation. That is also what is the community expectation for new lands, what those priorities are, as well as basically it's a whole new, I gotta view it as a whole new district. That's potentially going to be coming about with that. What does that mean for community infrastructure, capital planning, and what kind of things that we need in the community to guide that? So I very much welcome everybody in this room and all your brothers and brothers, cousins, family to show up to those consultation meetings, because that's going to basically be the plan for the next 50, if not 100 years in the community as to how are we going to grow. So long-term planning really helps get that into play. So the first, I guess, question of this would be, I've seen in your report that the organization of MCA has changed multiple times, new programs have shifted and things have divided in certain areas, certain programs that the community has, had fond respect for the last 20, 30 years is no longer in its previous incarnations. It's now being split into districts. So what can we see a brand new layout of all the organizations, programs within the MCA? Because it's only been a few years that I've been out of the system, and I'm scratching my head as to what programs are still in their position. Who do the community members go to? So having like a very updated organizational chart as well as references to contacts, because sending just one email to general MCA kind of can get lost when you know that the organization is so large. So having an updated organizational chart, understand what programs kind of did not survive COVID, because obviously they're saying that there's personnel issues. And I think that kind of goes back to the history of MCA of 10 years ago. It was deficits, hold on hiring, hold on giving raises, hold on this and that. And there was an MCR passed that said that there would be no more official raises. So is that MCR going to be rescinded to basically, if it's actually fair, people will show up for positions. Hopefully, if they felt that they weren't burned by the organization in some capacity. So can we get the organizational chart?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this has been part of the MCA service delivery. We want the community to know what services are available, where to go for them, excuse me. The open houses have been an example of that, which we haven't had in a while. Of course, COVID has paused a lot of things. It's definitely something that we need to do. And we can take that back and make sure that we're, org chart is a good start. Amazingly, a lot of them are not updated, but now since the FAL, council has to approve all of the new org charts, and which is, has been happening. So there's not a big global one that we can pull out in a big scroll and show you, unfortunately, but it's definitely something we have asked for, and it is, slowly coming together. You can appreciate there's, several departments, lots of positions, lots of people. It's underway.
Okay. And is there a donation policy and safe follows for when there's requests? Because I saw in the minutes there's been a few requests, some denials, some moving forward. Is there an official donation policy?
Yes, there is. Yeah, and it's available on the website as well.
And that has been followed for. And it's great to hear that there's been a donation from the community for certain organizations that support the community with community culture and youth. As well as that was kind of a large chunk of money, and that's kind of surprising from my side of. I've always heard it see it as a deficit or breaking even, so it's great to hear that we have such a surplus that we now can give to the community. So it's kind of like, what's the priorities for giving those large amounts of sums? Is it all to one bucket, or should it be spread between different organizations for the entire community? Because some programs and organizations in the community don't qualify for the community trust because they don't have the criteria. But they very much appreciate, some understanding of that. So there is a donation policy, and does that also follow conflict of interest?
No, the donation policy is singular, so organizational can go through it as well, but the organization has made contributions to various community groups outside of the donation policy, which have been all approved by council. I mean, we're in a position where it's funny, but it's not, right? We're in a position where we have not an abundance of money, but we can talk about, how to spend some of these reserves. And you're absolutely right, and 10 years ago, we were talking about where the priority areas are so we can, close programs and unfortunately lay people off, right? So that's not happening anymore, but it's, we've had some cash infusions in some various areas. There's been some financial prudence in the organization over the last several years that has resulted in surpluses. So now we're grappled with, trying to meet the priority areas, but be, efficient and accountable to the community as well. I remember there was a time when we just gave money away like this, right? And then the next thing you know, we were, months, years down the road, we were in the hole, right? So there's always got to be the balance here, and it's not easy. It's definitely not easy, and having, challenged by every department is having a hard time, and this is not within the MCA only. In every regional, every national meeting I've been to, every First Nation community is having a hard time finding people to work for their organization. I want to make that clear. So it's difficult finding people right now, right? And so those programs that they're trying to expand, meet the community need, are having a hard time meeting, our regular business, never mind doing new business. And it's very frustrating.
And is there a fleet policy for acquiring new vehicles or boats?
So the any asset that's purchased through the MCA after over a certain dollar value must follow the financial controls, which requires them to get quotes for that purchase.
Okay, so like in theory would be not a luxury sedan to like bombing around the reds or massive Lego. Oh, it would be what's serviceable for a need versus a need, not a want, right? There has to be justifications, and there are accountability structures in place for purchases through the hierarchy of the MCA. Okay, so can we get a list of how many big ticket items that have been purchased like that, like vehicles and fleets? Because I know when the community asks that of another government in the community, they scratch their head and say, we have no idea how many vehicles we have. But hopefully MCA has a better fleet management policy, right?
We have, most of these things get registered, so they have plates on them or some serial numbers or something, or boat registration or what have you. So there's a way, right? But we can undertake to do this. Surely, as you've heard from the auditor and our staff is strapped now. We have one person processing checks for the MCA, right? One is out sick, which was something happened, and there's several positions up, right? So if we're going to take that person out to track those reporting, that means we're not going to be doing that, cutting that check for the caterer or the electric bills or what have you, right? On that time. So this is a real reality in the MCA right now. So we can undertake, it may take some time to do this.
Okay. Moving on to a finalized area. Nine things. So I saw all the wonderful new community consultations and notices for Dundee, Seaway. Did I miss New York State one? Is there any updates on that one?
So the council is scheduled to receive a presentation from our legal counsel on the New York claim. The New York claim has been in negotiations with the parties, and the parties are the counties, the state, the Snaihne Mohawk tribe, the Mohawk Nation, and the Mohawk Council to come to an end, a resolve or a settlement agreement, basically. The council hasn't received a full presentation on what the status is. We've been getting updates along the way. This is something that we'll be having an internal conversation about. What's our next steps will be.
Okay, and I saw the call MCR that was passed in the May 29th, the council meeting about the Seaway. Who wrote that MCR?
Would have been Arrow and our legal counsel.
Okay.
And that would have likely accepted the regulations or called for the referendum.
About the referendum, and is there any early indication as to what the amount of money for the Seaway would be used for? Or are we just kind of do that?
Unfortunately, it's a bit of cart before the horse. I mean, the settlement is quite old now, unfortunately. But it is less restricted, and we want to keep it to the priority areas of the Seaway implications itself, i.e. erosion and what have you, to be able to, have the ability to expand in those areas relevant to the Seaway.
So there'll be community consultation on that, or is it being put into one of the two?
No, it will follow the same process where it will go separately, and then, we'll use some kind of process of engagement with the community to determine.
Okay, so I would also think that in the near future, I saw there was a notice for summer general meetings, and I know that previously, summer general meetings were on pause, and then district meetings were still going, so almost everybody on council is working some capacity with the summer. So is there gonna still be summer general meetings?
At this point, no, there isn't.
So only community members at the districts will be able to have updates on this.
Yes, but there will be, recognizing there is a referendum going on, so there will be 3 community consultations on that. You've identified the New York claim as an important item in the community, which is important to us. We'll be having consultations on that. We have several laws on the docket that need to go to vote before the end of the year. So the end of the year, because this next coming year is a general election. So there is essentially a number of community functions happening that are engagement with the community for priority areas over the summer. We have several laws that need to be considered by the community. We have a referendum underway, and then we'll have the New York claim that has to meet some sort of community input as well. So I can assure you that there's going to be lots of engagement sessions, just specific for those certain priority areas.
And is there criteria to say what is a successful consultation? Because I know that in the meetings, there was also said that since we will turn off for certain consultations, is council going to be at least saying we need at least X number of community input before we consider it valid? Or is it just going to be whoever is the one single squeaky wheel going to get what?
I'm sure you can appreciate, as being a former employee and as being in many community members, it's very difficult. That's a very challenge that we have all the way around. Right. So, I mean, it's always trying to find where do we land on sufficient consultation with the community. So is there a threshold? No, but council can and does identify certain areas of where they want it to be, i.e. through referendums or, special general meeting votes or what have you.
Okay, so the referendums will hopefully have multiple options rather than just take it or leave it.
So the upcoming one for the Seaway will have online and we'll have in person as well. As far as the laws, they're determined by council as they come forward. Basically based on not priority, but implications and what have you, that we can decide a vote at a general meeting or a special general meeting or a referendum.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very much for answering everything up and just make sure there was outstanding issue of the aggregated data for the consultants international fees. Because there are businesses, it's good to always know which business we are paying.
Yeah, there was a back over to here and then we'll go here and in front. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you did. Thank you.
So I'm sitting here and I have the Akwesasne Legislative Commission regulation. Section 3.1 general provision states, when calculating the number of days for the establishment of a deadline, the following guidelines shall be used. I don't think I need to read what the other sections say. I want to emphasize the word guidelines. So this is being used as a guideline. So guidelines can be very easily changed. I'd like to make a motion from the floor that council instruct the legislative commission to extend the election law community consultation period and to include amending the petition section before the current proposed amendments are voted on by the community. Need a seconder on the motion? Can we have a community vote on my motion?
So the regulations don't allow for a community for a motion and to be presented by the community to council. What we can do is, ask for an indication of support for what you're asking for. Otherwise, council, the only way to bind council in these situations is that a petition specifically asking for what you want has to be presented. And I think you'll recall at the community meeting where we talked about the electrical issue was the same thing, right? So there was a document presented to council that they had already prearranged with council that they would support that motion. That document was received. The community gave an indication of how they felt on this, and then council made that into a resolution, right? At their own council.
So you're telling me motions from the floor by community members are not allowable?
That's right. Yes, they're not binding. They're non-binding.
You just said in the regulation. Which regulation?
The procedure regulations for running council meetings.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull that up. So who do I get this from here?
I wanted, can you hear me?
Yes, we
I
can.
wanted to ask a question relating to finance. As you know, last week was now the celebration of Indigenous Days. And at the traveling college, we had a huge event, which was very, very successful. And we were lucky that that went through. Because at the last minute, MCA withdrew their funding. And I think it's personal. And I'd like to hear back from one of the committee members.
Committee member for,
From the finance committee. Why did funding get pulled?
the issue wasn't brought to the finance committee.
So I'm part of the finance committee along with those that raised their hands. That issue was not brought to the finance committee. It would have been an administrative call, so it would have went to Donna, right? Or our executive director, excuse me.
Well, just to let you know that MCA did not provide any dollars to the traveling college for that event. Shame on you.
Well, I'm aware of the issue. I did receive a letter. We haven't responded to it yet, and it hasn't had an opportunity to go to the finance committee at this time. I can tell you that there was purchases to be made that didn't follow proper approvals, and the purchases were halted, and it's still not been resolved yet. And unfortunately, an organization in the community was affected by that, and so we are working through that now. But ultimately, there was proper approvals weren't given, and I apologize that the organization has suffered from our breach of internal controls. And we're working through it, and the committee will be receiving at their next meeting more information in relation to that.
Was it personal?
I'm not sure what you mean by personal.
I think.
Was who did up in the frontier and then moved to the right. Right here, sorry. Okay,
I understand that there is a higher demand than supply for workers at this moment. But now that there is money, as we hear and talk about, for these roles, would you say that it's a work culture issue that keeps people away? And I have a question for you specifically. Do you feel like you have a healthy workplace?
So a work culture issue, I mean, I think that all of us as coming out of COVID has been struggling in several different ways. So I think that, you know, is the MCA having a difficult time? Yes. And is there other organizations that are? Yes. I think that, you know, is it to the point where people don't want to apply? I don't think so. I know, as I've said earlier, there's lots of organizations that are having a hard time. You know, I would attribute to some of the businesses that are on the southern side of the community where you start from Fort Covering to Messina, and there's 40 businesses in there that are employing a lot of people. And you think about they're open at least, you know, 12 hours a day, one person in them. You know, there's probably over 100 to maybe, you know, 150 of our people, likely a certain demographic working in those places that probably have some sort of formal education, right? I mean, so we're challenged by this, and we have seen, and we just had a presentation from Access on Monday, who talked specifically about this, that, you know, there's the workforce gap that's happening there. And we've seen this before. We've seen this before in other areas of the community and different commodities. So we're challenged by that, right? I mean, so it's multifaceted, right? And it's not singular to, you know, the MCA being a very bad place to work for. I can, you know, I think that the MCA is a wonderful place to work for. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. You know, can we do better? Yes, we can, but it's a multifaceted. And do I think that my workplace, which I work with all of these individuals here, I would say is reflective of the same as well. Thank you. Over here.
Chief in council, and I come to the whole Akwesasne today to ask me to implement a cyberbullying law. Today I come to ask another community member what the meaning of cyberbullying is. I want to know, in your mind, sir, what is the meaning of cyberbullying? If you can help,
I'm sorry, we're not. My apologies. We're not going to engage in back and forth like this.
No, I'm just saying. I'm asking for us Akwesasne cyberbullying law. This is a criminal code of Canada, federal offenses. People who do cyberbullying should be charged. I go to the police with all the screenshots, and they say Akwesasne don't have a law. I asked today if we and Akwesasne can get a cyberbullying law because of what someone has been doing to me, has done to the whole community. A lot of me now. I see it in our schools too with our kids. I see it everywhere. We don't have a law. He can get away with keep doing.
I'm sorry. Please address me. Thank you.
Is 241 of the criminal code. If you push someone to attempt suicide, you can get up to 14 years. 2 years ago, that's what he did to me. And nothing happened to him. I want a law now. I'm asking the community, everyone, to ask to put a cyber law in here now. Cyberbullying law in Akwesasne. I'm sick of this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Over to the far.
I have a couple questions here. My first question, now I live in Snaihne. Call it a petition for an incredibly long, perhaps half a century. The only thing is half a century ago, we didn't rely on electricity tonight. My first question is the electric issue in your strategic plan?
Not directly, but community infrastructure is.
So when something closes the MCA down for a day, you can't radio, but it costs you $200,000 per day in salary. Why wouldn't it be in your strategic plan? Specifically addressing the closure of the unforeseen closure of the MCA.
So it would be captured under sustainability and community infrastructure.
And I guess, why wouldn't you have generators in your buildings?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously the power issue has been ongoing for quite some time and it seems to have increased in the last little while. We are looking at making sure that we have, generators where needed. We have just recently looked at making additional investments into the elders generator program that we've had. We haven't made a decision on that, which is preliminary. When I talked about the technical aspect, I mean, obviously we to power, i.e. this building, it's an incredibly big generator. It's a significant cost and it's not just drop it in the parking lot and plug in the refrigerator. So there's a real technical aspect to it. And we just don't have the technical people at this point to go through each individual. It's happening. We are replacing right now the one at Akwesasne here, so that they're not part of the other building, the school there. So it's happening. It's just not happening fast enough.
This is incredibly long standing. I purchased a generator, sorry. Because I have insulin in my refrigerator. And I feel bad for those who can't afford those types of generators. But and it's costly, but it was not a necessity, it was a need. It wasn't a luxury item, it was a need. And when insulin goes bad, and other medications that most of the community, can share with you that, we have issues here. And I guess if this wasn't a strategic plan, I believe it would have been handled much earlier. And much more strategically. But right now, what is your plan for Quebec Hydro?
So we have had several meetings with them. It's a very technical, in fact, we had them present to the community last month, which their presentation is available online through the material, the PowerPoint that they have, and the meetings are recorded, so you can see it. There is a technical aspect to this, whereby the feed that's coming from Huntington is where most of the issues happen. We have had an independent analysis of the line from the edge of Snaihne to Dundee to find out if that is an issue there. The report is not finalized yet, but essentially that is not the issue. There is some issues around they call it vegetation, meaning trees and shrubs on there, but that's not predominantly where it happens. Where it's particularly seems to happen is from Dundee to Huntington. And the reality is that Akwesasne is at the end of the line. So one of the questions that was asked last month is, why don't you come to Akwesasne first to fix it? But the way electricity works is like water, right? I mean, if the power heading towards Akwesasne, if there's a break here, and here, you're starting from the back end working this way, it doesn't generally help. So we're working with them, lots of pressure on them to make investments. They have committed to making more investments. They are doing this summer, putting a backup line from Huntington to Dundee, so that if the one line has a problem, they'll have the ability to have the other one. Right now, it doesn't exist like that. So there are some things that they are doing. We have asked them, in which they explained last month that it's difficult, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, that across the road is New York Power, and then Quebec Power. The problem is that the voltage of New York Power, Quebec Power is not the same. So if we were to put them together, it's like 120 and 240. Those that you that understand the power, or it will explode, right? So you can't directly connect, which means in order to have a New York connection, we as a community would have to build infrastructure to bring the volume up so that they can connect safely, right? So it's not that simple. At one point, they were the same, they're not anymore. So we are, keeping pressure on them. We continue to look at what other options are. But and the generator programs is something that we are, advancing.
So. Is there, who's the working group that's working on this issue?
There is a committee that's been working with Hydro-Quebec over the last little while. If the members could identify themselves. Yeah.
Can we look at other avenues? Other sources of power?
Yes. I'd like to respond I wish I had more time. But I've been working steadily. Since I got back on council, I sworn in on December 15th. We had our first power audit on December 22nd, 26 hours ago. And ensuing afterwards, and shortly after that, we had a presentation from a woman from Six Nations. She was part of, she did a presentation at the General Meeting. It was on Onerahtohko. And, no, I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna take that back. She was actually doing a little bit of a strategic planning with us. And, she mentioned, there's probably not a First Nation out there that does not have a very extensive study of some kind sitting on a it's kind of like these things are happening, how sometimes, so I said, please, I guess that's a time. They be done for the next year and a half here, so, I knew that for a fact we had at least 8 such studies sitting on, wherever it got the dust, and that had to do with power. That went back to our days, when, we were still negotiating, the new plan, getting ready for the 9 megawatts of power company. So, we undusted those studies. I picked up the phone, I got a hold of Jim Ransom. People rolled their eyes when I said that name for some reason, but that's a smart man there. And we have gone forward full bore. We created a committee. Called it Lucky Whalers. And we have experts called buyers partners. They are very big players in the power industry. They have very deep pockets. So our agenda more so is to eventually realize our own Akwesasne power utility. Now, I hope someday we're probably going to do some maybe even surveys. I guess without me now, but there'll be some surveys done where we'll be asking the people if they support such a venture. We have a letter of support from the Snaihne Mohawk tribe. The Mohawk Nation Council of Chiefs supports what we're doing. I do not have such a letter from MCA. So we had a meeting, our last meeting, on Monday night, Byers was here. I mean, this project is moving awesomely. We have a very awesome committee formed of local Akwesasne professionals. So I'm very impressed with what we're doing, the discussions we're having. I see my friend here, Travis, is part of that committee. And funny man, our numbers man sitting there, but he's a professional. We have Tony Davis from the Snaihne Mohawk tribe. We have Jeremiah Point, engineer. Anyway, that's a good example of what kind of a team we have put together. So I'm convinced this can happen. I mean, we need to prepare. We need to think, I think, grander and will we consider economic development, because buyers, it's odd for them to say, and I'm a chief at the time, so they're saying, Chief King, you gotta exercise your sovereignty. You have a dam sitting right on your own territory. So they want us to consider purchasing that dam. That's how big they think, that's how big they want us to think. They want to be our partners going forward in all of these ventures. They want us to think about purchasing Cornwall Electric. These are the kind of things that we need to have. Unfortunately, I've been chastised for being a visionary and a dreamer. That's one of the reasons why somebody feels I should be because of that. But those are places that we're going. And I'm convinced that our team will have no problem going forward without me. But what I did as a chief, my first call was to just plant me card to regional Quebec chief. All of our issues, very aware of it already, know him well. So what he did was he reached out, he branched out for us. He got me about 45 minutes with Mark Miller, the federal minister. And others, the CEO of Quebec Hydro, we had the minister of Quebec here just last week. Gave 115,000 towards the church people project. And he sat next to me for a good half hour at his ear. Talked extensively about that power project, about the need for a firehouse time. So hopefully the power issue eventually, I don't know, I say within a year. Quebec Hydro has gave us that promise that things will get better within a year. Communications have gotten better, I'll say that. I probably had 6 emails in the last few days with Minister that were in the air. That's been years. His aid. So we're communicated more than we ever had. And one thing I've impressed upon him is the fact that we have a political protocol still in Quebec. He's aware of it. I had 1 more year on that. And again, one thing before we departed, we had a good chat about what we coined at one time called the Quebec League. That was part and parcel of our negotiation and simple as it sounds, but connecting us to Quebec. And that included a bridge connecting the Onerahtokha and Snaihne. A lot of work was done. Another example of studies that did collect and done. That's in 2015. I don't think it's done anywhere since. So I tested that out as well. So in the area of power, I want to say I've been all over this thing. Somebody may have to pick it up from here on out.
Thank you. We'll go back to, yes.
In terms of priorities, where does this issue fit with council?
It would fall under the infrastructure and sustainability.
Is it a priority for 2023 or a priority long-term 5-year plan? Where is it?
Well, I think that Chief King has described some work that he's doing on it, and he's alluded to somebody else needing to support it. It's not an initiative that council as a whole at this point has. There's no official ask Ben for a letter of support, so none has been provided. But there is a very technical aspect to that as well. I mean, and there is some opportunity because we have the New York claim, which could be settled, and there is some power there as well. Not enough to power the entire community, but essentially what it means is to bring together, the American side grid and the Quebec grid and the Ontario grid into one. But, I mean, from, previous analysis means that the rates are like this, the rates are like this, means that likely some of the rates that are low will go high so that the entire community has the same rate, right? So there's that. And the other thing is that, it's ultimately an infrastructure investment because the power poles that are here, Snaihne, Hogansburg, and Cornwall Island are owned by different companies and have different ways of, acquiring those assets. And, it definitely is something to examine, but if the community wants its own power company and it's going to cost us, $70 to $100 million to do, that debt has to be carried by someplace, right? And so when we have, monies available, is it in priority to invest $100 million or $70 million into a community infrastructure, meaning our own power company, or is $70 million needed, somewhere else, right? So we don't carry a lot of liability debt. We can go borrow $100 million tomorrow, but if council or community defaults, something bad is going to happen, right? I mean, they're either going to take the asset, which now means somebody owns the entire community asset, and now we're paying somebody else, or they take the reserves of the MCA, right? So these are big financial questions that need to be further explored. Conceptually, yes. But I can tell you, when the shot from Cornwall Island to St. Regis is several millions of dollars to put a conduit in there, just a conduit. You know, we have to run a power line in there. And so these are possibilities, but it goes back to a bit of, you know, the challenge we have in getting some infrastructure projects moving forward as well, right? So, I mean, it conceptually is good. Is it a priority? It's a priority to find sustainable electricity for the Quebec region. Is it our own power company? I'm not sure, right? And those conversations need to be had, because there are people out there that will loan money to our community. But the second you don't pay them back, they're going to either want the company or the 30 or 70 million dollars that we have in the bank. That's, you know, that is there. That's just how it works. So we are supportive of finding a way to bring sustainable electricity to the community, and we are examining those options. Yeah, there was another question, Cheryl, I think.
Can I finish this real quickly? Sorry. I think it's important. I got a need to make regarding Quebec Hydro. I went to the Canadian Human Rights Commission in Canada against Quebec Hydro. I'm convinced that's a human tragedy what's happened to us. They took a file, they sent me to the Quebec Human Rights Commission, so we're there as well. And they sent us back to Quebec Hydro as an internal mechanism, so we're over that as well. So that's why we're communicating more so. To have a little bit of egg on their face, so that helps get the ball rolling. And I did want to apologize, I forgot, Pat Oak sitting over here, she's also part of our London Wheelers committee, with all of our expertise that they'll be.
Thank you, Cheryl. We're gonna go back to you, and then we're gonna move.
Is it hour related? Yeah. Is it on the same topic? Different topic? Same topic? Okay, so in the meantime, you know, this is such a process to figure out what kind of avenue you're gonna go with. I feel like. You say, oh, okay, we're gonna get Generac or whatever for the elders. What about everybody else? Like, I have Lucas. There's a lot of other people who have all kinds of ailments. I don't have little kids anymore, so I don't know, I guess I'm not a priority because of the age range. I don't have little ones, I don't have that are in the home on the girl. So what about everybody in Snaihne saying, like, you keep running to come for in, and we're paying, we gotta pay for every different thing. And it's expensive. And like you were talking about working for, we're spending our extra, like that was Christmas that we spent there. So are you going to try to help accommodate Snaihne City with generators who don't have, like I have a generator, my daughter bought me one. And then like only holds enough power to do like one unit. It's not enough to heat the house, it's not enough for, you know, anything else. So what about that?
Yeah, so the priority is, again, is to find sustainability for electricity here. I mean, the generators are not the solution, right? I mean, we can't have 1,000 generators in the community, you know, it's not the solution. I mean, we're lots of pressure on Quebec Hydro to make those investments, to make those improvements to a backup line so that we have the ability. I mean, those efforts are underway. I mean, the long term, you know, is possibly, you know, is it our own community electrical system? I don't know, right? I mean, but that won't happen overnight either. We're doing the best that we can to find some short terms, and Quebec Hydro is committed to making those investments so that we have, you know, hopefully more sustainable power.
So in the meantime,
we're doing the best that we can. Yeah. Cheryl, we're gonna go back to.
I have any other different.
Oh, sorry.
You got a speed limit, go to the meeting. You got a speed limit, go to the meeting.
Go ahead.
So, I just wanna touch a little bit about delivering that messages from the elders. And one of the things that they asked me to talk about is about what they want is about a petition for Larry King. None of the elders here, well, a lot of ones that you talked to, but we don't want to meet with the way this set up. And I'd like to share what they said in Mohawk. What happened to our ways? If I don't like Cindy, then I'm gonna collect names and get rid of it. There was a long meeting with those elders. And they don't come to these meetings because they don't feel they're being heard. How much money is it gonna cost us? When one chief gets, let's go, then another chief, because I don't like him, I'm gonna let him go. But you know, when the guy in the wall. Where did it go that we all supposed to be working with them? Council's gonna be in a lot of loss of money when we start doing this. Where did that law come from? Who changed that? That's what they're asking. Who changed that we can just elect anybody and get them off of council? And when I'm sitting here listening, how come people don't want to work? Nobody's happy anymore. There's no more love in the community. There's no more respect in the community. And I agree with that, cyberbullying. I'm pissed. I almost lost my brother last year. No, my cousin. And when I heard those elders talk, you don't realize how much you're hurting somebody when you're acting like this. When you're calling somebody down, our kids need help. We got a drug problem here, we got an electricity problem here. Our fire hall, we got serious topics up here. So we're looking at getting stuff. Let's get rid of the chief. You know what? I wish they were here today. I wish they came to this meeting, but they don't want to be here. They're not feeling any respect. I don't know what to call now. What is it? Oh, how did you go on? Who could be about this? Right? I thought this guy in a while. We're making fun of them. You know what? I heard one of my chiefs are gonna get let go. That's why I came to this meeting. It's not how it works. If my chief has done something wrong, I would go up there. That's the way it used to be. How come it's not like that anymore? You can sign names from all over the place to get rid of one chief. We need a good plan here. And when you hear them talk about Buddy Williams, that's not even in this room anymore. We need our language back in there. We need our way of life back in there. When I heard, have you ever heard of the old people talking? The way they talked a long time ago. Everybody on council helped each other out. Everybody here supported that council. And today it's not. Now we're gonna let one chief go, we're gonna let another one go in, we're another one going next week. How much is that gonna cost us? We need to look at what's here, what's happening to us. We got a lot of family that's sick. You know, I got called. 7 people almost committed suicide. That's what we need to look at. It hurts to see that, pulling them off the road. I brought this up a long time ago when I took up one of the nephews and some other relatives. And we're sitting here pointing fingers. Let's get rid of the chief. We need to work together again. We need to bring that love back to our families. Our families are all falling apart. And we're pointing fingers. The one thing they asked us to get rid of that law, they changed it. Nothing to go on with it anymore. We don't follow our ways anymore. Follow the mainstream ways. That's what I want to bring to the table. When they brought that to the table last night, they told me
And they said to say what I have to say, to change it. We're only hurting ourselves if we're gonna keep following that. If you got something mean to say, you're not happy in here. You're supposed to be happy with everybody that you meet. That's how it was a long time ago, when you talked in your language, it was always from here. Touch me, you have to hide it. You don't even look at each other anymore. See somebody at the bottom. I couldn't get an answer. Yeah, you're very strong on Facebook, right? Well, man, they shut all those machines off and shut all the power off, because I work up north and there's no power, you should see how nice they are, because we have to miss it. I needed to bring that up because I don't agree with getting rid of a chief that is simple. Yeah, and I was glad that the elders really said what they had to say the past couple of nights. I visited a lot on the island. I went to Snaihne. And that's the messages I'm bringing here today. 38 names, wow. You really gotta look at where we going with Akwesasne. You need to support these guys in here. We voted them in and we need to be there for that.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so I made a motion from the floor, it got rejected and shot down, and you said I needed to look at the procedural regulations. So I'm looking at the legislative registry, there's no regulations on here. So as difficult as it may be in these other regulations surface like ADJOURNMENT, you're putting in processes in place that make life difficult for community members to access information. And we just got done saying what happened to the old days, the old ways. The old days, the old ways, you could ask the chief to help you out, get you a document. They would run and they go grab that document for you, and they turn around and give it right back to you. So seeing as I can't make the motion from the floor, and the community member read in the format of an MCR and provided it to you, this is being recorded. If I can't make a motion, I would like to make a very strong recommendation that the council make it a priority to instruct the legislative commission to immediately extend the election law community consultation period and to include amending the petition section before the current proposed amendments are voted on by the community. Keep in mind, under their own regulations, it's just a guideline. That section is just, the document is just a guideline. So it's not like you do not have the power to speak to them and impress upon them that this outstanding issue since the Dennis Chazzy situation hasn't been addressed. And it needs to be put back out there. Then we need to vote on it in the community to stop this insaneness of what's happening of. If you're not liked, somebody can do what's happened right now. I really appreciate you. Thank you. I like this way. I've been really see.
Thank you, Cheryl. I mean, I want to be clear. I'm not shoot down what you brought forward. I'm set by a set of rules that apply to how we run these meetings. And it's my job as the chair of the meeting, as the Grand Chief, to make sure that we run by those rules. And they're set there for a purpose. And I can tell you that, you know, we will take what you have said. We are in a very difficult position. And there is no winners and there is no losers in this. And then I speak about the petition process. What you mentioned another individual who received the petition at the time. I was the Grand Chief at the time. I undertook a process when went to Mohawk Court and asked for the processes that are available to make a determination of whether or not, non-district members, so just electors, can sign petition to remove a member. And we filed that in the courts because we wanted a decision, and we received a reply from the legislative oversight, or you have to excuse me the name. Anyways, the decision said that while the drafters of the law may have wanted just district electors to remove a chief, that's not what is in the law. The law says an elector. So yes, it is not proper for a district to elect a member, but everybody abroad to remove the member. But the law says what it is. And council, I can tell you, is in a very difficult position here because we swear an oath to uphold community laws. And this community law says specifically what council should do. So yes, people will say, well, you don't uphold this law, you don't uphold this law, but this law says council will do this action. The other laws don't say council will remove a non-member from the community. Council will give a ticket for a speeder. This law has a specific function of council. And so we are in a very difficult position. We have to accept the petition and accept the results and make a declaration of either a by-election occurs or it does not. And I can tell you, we have talked a lot about this and the process on changing the law. You can appreciate that, the election law governs the members of council here. So the second that we say, do this with that law that affects us, right? We get a lot of scrutiny for saying you're interfering with that law, right? Take it that member of council has a criminal record. And if council says, put in there, take out criminal record from the law, what do you think community is going to say? You're doing that for your benefit. So that's an example. We are in a position where we move this way, we're gonna get, it's not right. Move this way, it's not right. It's a very difficult position for us. And in this case, we have one individual who was affected by it, and we have an obligation to uphold the law where it is. We can look at if we can maneuver the process of where the amendments are, but unfortunately, it's not going to change where we are today.
But
And
did you hear what you just said? You were on council.
Yeah.
When the last thing happened with Mr. Chazzy,
Mhm.
you were also in a position.
Yeah.
For somebody from that time frame to now to have brought forth
Mhm.
that section of what's gonna be voted on and have it addressed and rewritten and
Yeah.
corrected.
Cheryl,
It was never corrected.
I'm a single person, I'm one grand chief, and there are a lot of competing priorities. Yes, this is important to me. I can't get to everything, right? So there were other members, there's other community members involved in this. There's processes that have undertaken to amend the law now, that people needed to have taken part in. So it's
Abram, all I'm saying is you have 12 people. sitting
that's right.
beside you.
And I'm telling you,
They should be working with you, that somebody should have made it a priority, that when that decision came out about Mr. Chazzy, somebody should have basically said, we gotta address this, and it would have been in this new amendment stuff that's gonna be voted on soon. My last comment is, shame on the police for treating this young lady that had the courage to stand up here, and for them to give her an answer of, you don't have a law. All of a sudden, the Akwesasne Mohawk Police Service wants to play that you don't have a law card? Shame on them. You all know, and everybody in this community knows, they apply federal law more than anything in this territory. And these bylaws are worthless in our community because there's no punitive sections to it. But the minute somebody crosses the line involved with drugs smuggling or whatever the case may be, they'll sure as hell work to put them in prison, right? And same thing, you pull this up, the first thing you see is the banishment law. Let's try to use this banishment law, what's happened around here, will probably be laughed out of town. That's my last comment.
All right, we have a few more minutes for other business from the floor, and then we're gonna have to move the resolution. We are.
You didn't ask, she's wanting to extend, the rule says you gotta ask to extend this long enough.
Excuse me, I can't hear you.
Your rules ask the council to extend past 8 p.m. You didn't ask that, so if you ask and if they agreed to extend past 8 p.m., you don't have to rush them.
I'm not rushing anybody. I'm not seeing a pile of hands up, so that's, okay, there you go. All right. Over here first, and then, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Early to this council term, I went to my district meeting, Heather Phillips, Farm Island, for those of you who don't know. And I specifically asked for every governance document to be available to the community. So we know what rules everybody needs to play by. And I asked for that to be posted publicly, and it still hasn't been done. And that's 2 years into council. So can we please have the procedural regulations, your duties, the election law, and anything that has to do with governing our community made publicly available, please and thank you.
Yes. Okay, we're going over here. Then we'll make our way back.
Oh. Hi. Yeah, I remember when I was on council. The whole damn council wanted to kick me out. And prior to that, Esther, I think that's you, sir. The whole council wanted to kick somebody out. And the group before that, they wanted to keep their motor part out of it. But when it came to me, and all your regulations, they're your regulations, you guys wrote it. You know, we followed. But when it came to me, I said, okay, I told the 6, 7 chiefs, you wanna kick me off council? Kick me off. You don't want me to go to vote in Cornwall? Kick me off council. You think they would have got up and got a petition? Which we're doing now. So anybody get kicked off of council, it's not a new thing, it's happened before. Do I support what happened to Larry? Probably. Do I not support it? Probably. I'm not saying he's a good man or a bad man. My kids were asking me, what Larry did? I said, I don't know, he probably didn't get along with me. That's all I'm saying, I'm not giving him a credit. But I'm not taking it from him, so I'm just saying, you guys broke the law. You guys tried to change it in 2005, you guys tried to change it in 2011. You guys tried to change it just last month. I missed that goddamn meeting. You keep wanting to change your election regulation. Why didn't you stay with the first thing? Years ago. But no, council's too big. You want to go down to 9 councils. You want to go down to staggered terms. Don't you guys realize what you're doing when it comes to election regulations? Or, you know, back when, and there's a lot of people in here. You remember when we had an Indian agent? Okay, and then we got our own government, we're now that we have a grand chief, we have council, that's self-government. And look at what we're doing. I'm not saying we're either to each other's throat. But God damn, we've surely messed up a whole lot of things. A lot of people are complaining, they have softball questions, a lot of people are dreaming, they have this plan, this program. Give it up. If you're gonna go by your regulations, go by them. Don't change them tonight, don't take them tomorrow. You know, we're gonna have a referendum, that's all I got to say. Kick somebody.
Thank you. Right next to him, right here. Yeah, we're gonna move over, we're gonna move along.
I had a question with regard to, earlier, April, you had said something about required to check box something when you do a funding application for projects for community consultation. Is that something that's required for all project submissions that are done to the funders
Certain dollar values.
for a certain dollar? amount?
Yes, yeah.
So with respect to the Akwesasne Mohawk Police Service on their potential move to Cornwall Island. I know that's not a direct expense for infrastructure, but may potentially impact the community of Akwesasne on the northern portion. Is there going to be some kind of community consultation and how that's going to pan out
Yes,
with respect to substations in Onerahtohko and in Snaihne?
yes, yeah. I'll tell you that project, right, it's still conceptual. It's very conceptual. So we talk about design time. That's actually been over 2 years in trying to design a station, and it's not even close to anything being submission or anything like that.
But it's in design and hopefully someday will come to fruition, whether it's gonna be on the island or staying somewhere or just not somewhere.
Yeah.
Or maybe in Dundee, you never know.
Yeah.
But and then my next item is hopefully we'll be able to have a general meeting in July and August. I know you have stated that it's been practiced, but practices can change. I want to know where it states that you can do that. Cause I thought in your rules and regulations, you're supposed to have monthly meetings.
The
general
word
meetings.
that's in the regulation says generally every month.
Generally every month?
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully we can generally
Have a general meeting. Generally, you can have a general meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Who's going down? We have, yeah.
Okay. So I wanna give love here. I know what she said earlier was really brave. And I also want to bring it back to what Amy was talking about as far as respect, bullying, lateral violence. And me, I'm sitting back here and I'm reading everybody up here, and you had a specific chief that was speaking. And there was a lot of eye rolling. There was a lot of, you know, you can see it on your expression of your faces. And I think that's really unprofessional. Yeah. And just we can see you, you're on camera. So just keep an eye on your facial expressions and everything like that. I think it was very disrespectful. And I remember the last general meeting, I don't know if you talked about it today, in your beginning remarks, April, but you talked about respect. Yeah, I think that's number one, is you guys should be respecting us as we talk and each other up there as you guys talk as well.
Thank you. We're gonna get down. We're going across here, so, okay. On the end.
Okay, I just forgot to mention. You said that would cost us much or whatever about the generators. Then I remembered the financials and the casino realm money. So it's something I want to explore.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else over here? Okay, join.
I just want to make a comment on your monthly reports. I know I brought this up before. And I'm very disappointed. Abram, I want to thank you for your reports. Your reports are always outstanding. It explains everything you're doing. If you look at his report, you'll see how he has so much detail in his reports. Then you go back to some other chiefs, one pagers of meetings they've attended. Now, one explanation about what the meeting's about, what were the concerns for those meetings? There's about maybe 3 or 4 chiefs on council that give good reports every month, not just dates of meetings they went to. I think all of you, from the amount of money you get paid every month, at home, should have more reports like Abram does. And Cindy's another one that has another report. Your reports are supposed to be detailed, not just one-liners like these. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I'm gonna do last call for business from the floor. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Here representing the fire department. On your slideshow here, there was not one little slice on the pie for fire protection. That's very concerning for me. We should have a surplus of, a couple $1 million because those trucks next door ain't cheap. Our fire gear's not cheap. It costs $4,500 for one fireman to be suited up from head to toe. And I also have a petition. I have a removal vacancy for Vince Thompson. This petition is presented to Mohawk Council of Akwesasne to remove Vince Thompson, Onerahtohko District Chief, due to endangering the safety of Akwesasne, no support for Snaihne fire law, and mistreatment of community members.
Thank you.
All I have to say,
All right. Thank you. For the record, I just want to acknowledge that a member has provided me with a petition. So I've accepted that as part of the record. Okay. All right. So we're going to move along. We do have 2 resolutions. One is to accept the general meeting minutes of May 25th, and one is to accept the results of the last petition. So I have a resolution to accept and approve the attached general meeting minutes dated May 25th, 2023. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Vanessa, second by Sarah. Discussion on the resolution. Questions been called on the resolution. All in favor? Any against the resolution? None against, the resolution is carried. Four standard clauses, and whereas the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne general election for the 2021-24 three-year term was held on June 26, 2021, in accordance with the Akwesasne election law. Where the by-election was held on December 3rd, 2022, to elect one district chief for the district of Onerahtohko. And whereas Larry King was declared the duly elected district chief for the district of Onerahtohko for the remainder of a three-year term, having received 38 votes according to the official record of the Onerahtohko by-election, which was released on December 9th, 2022. Whereas District Chief Larry King took his office on December 15th, 2022, began his term of office. Whereas on May 25th, 2023, petition for the removal of Onerahtohko District Chief Larry King was delivered to council at a duly convened general meeting in accordance with section 16(2) of the Akwesasne election law enacted by MCR 2019-20-212. Whereas section 16(2)(a) of the Akwesasne election law requires that a petition request the removal of district chief be signed by an equal number of votes plus one from the official total number of votes that the district chief received on the election/by-election day. And whereas on May 29, 2023, the electoral officer, Onerahtohko, examined each signature on the petition and removal of Onerahtohko District Chief Larry King in accordance with the Akwesasne election law 16(3) and reported as follows. Total number of signatures, 64. Eligible voters, 51. Not on the voters list, 13. Ineligible, could not identify, 0. Whereas the verification process has established that 51 eligible voters signed the petition, which is more than the minimum number of 38 plus 1, 39 votes required to remove Larry King as Onerahtohko District Chief. Where section 16(5) of the Akwesasne election law requires that the results be delivered at a duly convened general meeting of council, and that council shall declare the member removed by and order a by-election for that position. Therefore be resolved that council hereby accepts the results of the verification process as delivered by the Chief Electoral Officer, Onerahtohko, at a duly convened general meeting on June 29, 2023. And be it further resolved that as a result of the verification process in accordance with section 16(5) of the Akwesasne election law, council declares that Larry King is hereby removed from office as Onerahtohko District Chief effective today. And be it finally resolved that a by-election is to take place for Onerahtohko District Chief within 90 days from today's date on a date to be set by the electoral officer. Could I have a mover for the resolution, please? Moved by Dwayne, second by Vince. Discussion on the resolution. Questions been called on the resolution. Those in favor of the resolution, please raise your hand. Those against the resolution, please raise your hand. There's none against the resolution. The resolution is carried. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the conclusion of our general meeting this evening of June 29th here at the District of Onerahtohko. We have heard what the community has had to say about community meetings. There is a resolution, a petition that was presented this evening that will have to go through a process which will require a community meeting to present those results. So we will inform the community of the next community meeting in the very near future. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. But I have a motion to adjourn, please. Vanessa and Sarah, thank you.